hack collapsing in the wind, a cow in the yard, and love that learns to flourish even when electricity is out. And believe, you will laugh, get emotional, and maybe, just maybe think, would I have the courage too? Would you give up everything to live in the middle of nowhere? I would leave the comfort of the city, the right salary every month, the pizzeria around the corner, the fast Wi-Fi. All for a little peace? This is the story of Mark and Helen, an ordinary couple surrounded by buildings, noise, and routine. But one day he got tired of just surviving, and decided to live. They didn't win the lottery. They didn't have rich parents. Not a perfect plan. They just had each other, and an absurd desire to start over, from scratch on top of a mountain where no horns are heard. But you hear your heart pounding again. Get ready to meet a real story, exciting and with a hint of humor. Because life outside the city is not just about beautiful sunsets. It is made of AS. Marcos has always been a practical guy. A civil engineer, his hair always in line, his dress shirt tucked into his pants, and a leather briefcase that he carried as if it were an extension of his arm. Helena, on the other hand, was an art teacher, passionate about watercolors, poetry, and plants that did not survive more than 2 weeks in the small and stuffy apartment where they lived. They lived in one of those high-rise buildings in the city, with a privileged view of the front building. The alarm clock rang every day at 6:30 in the morning. Traffic, rush, busy schedule. Bread on the griddle in a hurry, coffee burning the tongue, and a constant feeling that life was dripping through your fingers, like wet sand. It was on any given night, one of those nights when silence weighs more than words, that they looked at each other and, without planning, let out together an "I can't take it anymore." Helena was on the couch, with a jar of ice cream in her lap and her eyes swollen from a documentary about freely migrating birds. She looked at Marcos, who was still in his shoes inside the house, reading work emails on a Saturday night. The scene was pathetic and completely ordinary. "Love, what do we live for?" She blurted out, with that voice of someone who is on the edge. "I don't know, to pay for a ticket?" He answered, half joking, half telling the truth. That's when the slap happened. The city no longer made sense. The noise wasn't just from traffic anymore, it was inside them. My heart was beating for something else. For calm. Overland. By open sky and clean air. For real silence. And that's when the first absurd idea arose. What if we were to live on a mountain? Of course, they both laughed. Like it's a silly joke. But that idea, seemingly ridiculous, stuck like gum to the soul. And what was just a random thought turned out to be the beginning of the biggest turning point of their lives. After that night when the question, what if we were to live on a mountain? It echoed around the room. What was a joke was turning flat. And like every good bold plan, it started with a Google search. How to drop everything and live in the bush. Simple life in the mountains. Where to start? Couple leaves the city and lives happily? Is it possible? Marcos, a methodical engineer, soon created a spreadsheet. Costs, distance from nearby cities, internet access, because not so much to heaven, right? And even list of essential tools to open a trail in the bush. Helena, she opened Pinterest. It already had 27 panels with ideas of rustic cabins, wood stoves, and handmade crochet rugs. They both knew it was going to be difficult. But you want to know, for the first time in years, they were excited about something. It was not a promotion, not a new car, not a mobile phone with 3 cameras. It was a dream that fit into a tight embrace. They started scouring places. First, they thought of a place, then on a farm, until they found it, a rustic land on top of a mountain with a view to infinity and the smell of bushes in the air. It had a small wooden house falling apart, a half-crooked fence, and lots of nature. When they went to visit, the scene was surreal. A goat appeared out of nowhere, climbed into Marcos' backpack, and just lay down. Helena looked at Prakilo and said, "Baby, this is it." And there, without a signed contract, without even knowing where the nearest gas station was, they decided, let's make our madness our new home. On the way back to the city, inside the car, the silence was different. It was no longer the silence of empty routine. It was the silence of someone who knows they are about to do something big, crazy, and absolutely right. Colored the discussions and reconciliations. The decision was made. They were leaving. Really. Only like everything in life, between deciding and doing, there is a whole ocean of boxes, goodbyes, and emotions stored in forgotten drawers. The following Sunday, they began the Mutireo de Mudança. Helena, with tears in her eyes, was taking the books off the shelf one by one. Each book had a story, a moment, a phase. This one I read when we fought over the curtain, she laughed. And that when we made up. Marcos, in the middle of the storage, found an old photo album. There they were, young, on a trip to the beach, on a picnic, hugging on the balcony of the old apartment. He sat on the floor with the album in his lap and stood there quiet, thinking. Life had been good, but it could have been better. It could be lighter. More of them. Meanwhile, people around began to figure out the plan. 202 neighbor twisted her nose. Mountain, you're so crazy. There is no delivery. Marcos' mother called worried. But what if there is a shortage of hot water? What if a wild animal shows up? And even the doorman got on the wave. Marcos, can I have that fancy microwave if you don't use it? But in the midst of so much astonishment and doubt, he also had support. Helena's sister sent an audio she'll never forget. Little sister, you are doing what everyone dreams of, but few have the courage. Go out there and live that dream for all of us. The move was set for a Friday of cloudy skies. It wasn't cinematic, it was real. An old truck, a sofa tied with a seat belt, and a couple of racing hearts. Before closing the door to the apartment for the last time, Helena looked around. The white walls, the echo of footsteps, the window through which the sun set so often. She smiled. We're taking what matters, both of us. And they went down, without looking back. The elevator creaked, as if to say goodbye too. And there they went, towards the unknown best known of all, the heart itself. They arrived late. The dirt road seemed endless, and the car almost asked for a lift on the last climbs, but resisted. When they finally parked in front of the new house, a simple wooden cabin with a balcony overlooking the mountains, silence was the first thing that embraced them. No horn, no siren, no neighbor yelling in the hallway, just the sound of the wind passing through the trees, and the heart beating a little harder. That sounds like a lie here, Helena said, her eyes waterlogged. Mark did not answer. He just took off his shoes, stepped on the grass barefoot, and closed his eyes. That was it. It was over there. That first night, they slept on mattresses thrown on the floor, with borrowed blankets and a makeshift campfire outside. And for the first time in many years, they slept peacefully. But of course, real life soon knocked on the door. And he didn't even ask for permission. The first dawn came with the sound of a chicken that wasn't theirs, but decided their backyard was the farm's new spa. And along with her came uninvited visitors. A frog the size of a soup plate, a hyperactive squirrel that found the fruit bowl, and a rooster that insisted on singing at 3 a.m. It's the time zone of the camp, Marcos joked, his eyes swollen. The kitchen still had no gas, the refrigerator was tiny, and the cell phone signal looked like a legend. But even with all this, they laughed. Because it was just the beginning. And they were together. They were opening boxes little by little, decorating with what they had, improvising with what was left. Helena turned an old barrel into a corner table. Marcos used pieces of wood to assemble a plant stand. Everything was simple, but everything had a soul. And at the end of that day, they both sat on the porch, drinking coffee made on the stove, watching the sun hide behind the mountains. The city is there with its lights, its noises, and its clocks running. And we here, learning to listen to time, Helena said, resting her head on his shoulder. It was just the beginning, but you could already feel it. The peace they were looking for wasn't in the mountains. It was between them. In the first week, the hut began to transform. Not only inside, where handmade paintings and flowers picked from the garden began to emerge, but inside them too. It was as if every day there was a reminder. What is essential does not take up much space. What they did not know was that nature, although beautiful and peaceful, also likes to give its scares. In the early hours of Thursday morning, the sky collapsed. But it wasn't just any rain. It was a spectacle of thunder, lightning and wind whistling in the cracks of the wood. Helena woke up with a jump. Mark, the house will fly. He, still half groggy, replied. If it flies, I hope we fall into a place with a bakery. They both laughed, nervous. They grabbed flashlights, covered the windows with what they had, and ran into the middle of the room. Helena cuddled to 2 pillows. Marcos with a bucket. Go drip. The rain hit hard. The trees danced as if they were in a private show, and the feeling was of being in another world. But you know what surprised you? It wasn't fear. It was the reception. In the midst of the chaos outside, the two were together, protected, taking care of each other. For the first time, they felt at home. Not because of the walls, but because of the hug. When the day dawned, the hut was there. Whole. Wet, yes. A little messy, with the smell of brushwood and coffee, but full of life. We survived the first storm, Helena said, a towel wrapped around her hair. And still in style, Marcos replied, showing a perforated galosh. Between buckets, rags, and laughter, they discovered a new truth. Living on the mountain wasn't just about tranquility, it was about endurance. And when you have someone next to you, fear becomes history. And history becomes a good memory. That afternoon, they hung clothes on the clothesline, drank coffee with bread made in the wood-burning oven, and wrote it down in the diary of their new life. First Storm 1. Monday, we will try to plant lettuce. Simple, real, and beautiful. Because life for two is that. Rain, laughter, and love, all together, all mixed up. The next morning looked promising. The sun finally appeared through the clouds. The little birds sang as if they were in a rehearsed choir, and Helena went out with her straw basket to pick berries, as if in a fairy tale rural version. Mark, in turn, was proud. He had finished building a rustic fence with branches and reused wire. Look at that, Helena. Now no bugs come in here. Helena smiled, looked fondly, and answered, It's beautiful, love. But remember the fence in our yard in the city? The one that the neighbor's cat jumped at with a look of contempt? They laughed, nostalgic, not knowing that that fence would be, at most, symbolic. Because in the middle of the afternoon, the silence of the mountain was interrupted by a sound that neither of them expected to hear so soon. May. 2 goats. Yes, goats entered the path of the trail, as if they were the new owners of the piece. One of them with an expression that clearly said, What's up, urban couple? So ready for the real bush. Marcos, why do you have 2 goats looking at us as if they were IBG inspectors? Worse, Helena. One of them is eating the towel from the balcony. A scene worthy of a sitcom began. Marcos running after the goats, Helena trying to distract them with apples, and the animals absolutely quiet, as if it were all part of a scheduled tour. At the end of the afternoon, they managed to convince the goats to leave, with a trail of bananas and a lot of conversation. And after all, sitting on the little step of the balcony, Helena looked at the horizon and said, What if we started getting visitors like this? Not goats, of course, but people? People for what? To experience a weekend here. Slow down, breathe, reconnect. We'll see there are more people wanting it. Mark was silent for a while. It looked at the mountain, the traces of the goat invasion, and especially the eyes of Helena. There an idea was born. What if their refuge could also be the refuge of others? Not a hotel, but a place of healing, of peace, of reconnection. It was too early to call it a business. But at that moment, something planted root. And like everything on the mountain, it would grow slowly, but hard. The decision was made on a cold night, under the blanket of mountain stars, while Helena drew in her notebook with red pen and Marcos tried to understand what a dry toilet with compost was. It settled, love. Let's open the mountain refuge. But it has to be different. No luxury, no distraction. Just nature, love, and coffee on the wood stove. Marcos smiled suspiciously. And goats, don't forget the goats. In the following days, preparations began. Helena made a simple post in a Simple Life group on Facebook, with a photo of the chalet and the phrase, 2 nights to reconnect with the essentials. Only 3 spots. Come breathe. She thought no one would answer. But within 2 hours, the inbox was full. Mark, I think there are too many people wanting to reconnect. Among those interested, they chose 3. A yoga teacher in existential crisis. A programmer who quit his job to write a book of poetry. A woman named Giselle who said only, I need to disappear from the world for a few days. They are lost souls, said Helena, with a twinkle in her eye. Just like people were. Then came the tidying up of the guest cottage. They cleaned it, decorated it with flowers from the field and handmade candles, by Helena, of course. And Marcos took pride in installing an ecological bathroom that, according to him, was innovative and sustainable. Friday arrived. Helena and Marcos were nervous. They looked like 2 teenagers before a date. They prepared soup, artisanal bread, and left a playlist of soft guitar playing in the background. The first steps echoed on the trail. It was Giselle, in sunglasses, a giant backpack, and a look of those who urgently needed silence. Then the other 2 arrived. Everything seemed perfect. Until, the next morning, Giselle came out of the bathroom with an expression that mixed shock and poetry. Helena, the bathroom, has its own personality. What do you mean? He bubbled, and then it made a weird sound. I think he answered me. Marcos ran there. The ecological system had clogged up because of eucalyptus leaves that he himself had put. thinking that it would help in the aroma. Result, the sustainable toilet rebelled. Love. Maybe the mountain is telling us to be more humble. But the most curious thing was to see that, despite this, the guests stayed. They laughed. They helped fix it. They ate potato soup on the balcony floor and said they had never felt so alive. At parting, Giselle hugged Helena and whispered, "I felt it again." The programmer left a note. "Thank you for reminding me that the world is beautiful off-screen." And the yoga teacher stretched out in the lotus position and said, "I'm a tree now. Gratitude." Helena and Marcos entered the cottage and looked at each other. They cried and laughed at the same time. "It was just the beginning," she said. "What about the bathroom? We'll get better. But with less eucalyptus, please." The sun had barely risen when Helena heard the sound of her cell phone vibrating. Strange. The connection on the mountain was almost non-existent, except for a tiny signal point that only caught on top of a rock behind the house, affectionately nicknamed the Tower of Hope. Barefoot and with a cup of hot tea in her hands, she climbed to the top of the stone and unlocked her cell phone. More than 70 messages. Instagram notifications, emails, even a voice message. "Love, I think someone found us." Hours later, it all made sense. The yoga teacher who had stayed there posted a video. She talked about the mountain refuge with tears in her eyes and finished by saying, "It was there that my soul stopped screaming." The video went viral. Thousands of likes. Comments asking for information. Invitations to interviews. An alternative travel site published a story with the title, "The Couple Who Gave Up Everything to Build a Real Paradise." Marcos, who was teaching a chicken not to peck at the porch cushions, heard the news and widened his eyes. "But we just wanted peace. And now we have a queue to come here," Love said Helena, showing the waiting list that already numbered 49 people. The refuge, which previously received 3 people a month, had now asked to book until 2030. It was time to decide, to remain small and intimate, or open up a little more and create something that could welcome more people, while still being what it's always been. "We're gonna need help, right?" said Helena, looking at the makeshift cottages and eco-toilet with dubious personality. "Or a miracle," answered Marcos, already thinking about where to get enough wood to build 2 more rooms. In the days that followed, the couple worked like never before. They built another hut with their own hands, tested new recipes using only ingredients from the garden, and even created a small meditation circle with stones they had harvested together on old trails. But fame, it brought more than just joy. One evening, during a group's farewell dinner, one of the guests, a man in a suit with a gleaming watch, asked, "Are you thinking of turning this into a network? I would have interested investors." Helena braked. Mark took a deep breath. "That's not a product here. It's our home. Our heart. It has no price tag." The silence took over. And then one of the guests, a lady with gray hair and tender eyes, firmly said, "That's exactly why this place is special." That night, lying in front of the fireplace with their dogs at their feet, Helena and Marcos talked for hours. They knew that growing up was possible, but not at the expense of the soul, nor of love. "Let's keep going," she said, but calmly. "Our way. We built it with our hands and heart. This is what we will continue to offer." And so, little by little, the mountain refuge not only grew, but flourished. No rush, no noise, with truth. The mountain retreat began with just 2 hearts tired of the rush of the world. And now, it was starting to pulse with other beats as well. It all started with Andrea, a plastic artist with a shy smile and tired eyes, who arrived saying that she would only stay for 2 days. By the 3rd, she was already helping to paint the wooden boards of the trail with phrases like, "Here you take a deep breath. There is no need to hurry. Remember your heart." Then came Gustavo, a chef who worked in a fancy restaurant in the big city. He had exchanged his suit for rubber boots and a basket of mushrooms. He arrived wanting to take a break, and ended up setting up a small kitchen in the abandoned barn, creating dishes that mixed simplicity with a touch of magic. In less than 2 months, 5 people had decided to stay. Not forever, but for now. To heal. To start over. To remember what really matters. Helena, sitting on the porch of the house, watched it with tears in her eyes. "We created a village unintentionally, Love." Mark laughed, hugging her from behind. "It's the village of those who chose to live." Really. Over time, the mountain refuge gained a new nickname among those who passed by. The place where the heart remembers to beat calmer. Nights were made up of wheels around the campfire, laughter mixed with the smell of mint tea, and stories told under the glow of the stars. People who had forgotten to smile began to remember. People who were afraid of silence came looking for him. What about the couple? The couple was closer than ever. Every day was a new discovery, not only about the earth, animals, or people, but about themselves. One morning, Mark woke up before the sun, took an old notebook and wrote, "I thought I needed to get out of town, but I realized that what I was really looking for was to get back to myself." When Helena read it, she smiled and replied, "We found our way." And unintentionally, it lit up other people's too. At the end of that month, something even more special happened. A young woman named Clara, who had been staying for a few days, asked if she could plant a tree near the stream. "I want to leave something here, a seed like you left in me." And so a new tradition began. Every person who stayed there could plant something. Flowers, trees, herbs, a wish, a dream. The refuge was little by little transformed into a living garden of stories, scars, and rebirths. The morning started differently. The sky, which always woke up blue over the mountain, was covered with dark, dense clouds, as if something above reflected what was about to happen below. Helena felt it even before getting out of bed. An intuition, a chill in the belly. And Marcos, on her side, also looked restless. The noise of a car coming down the dirt road leading to the refuge broke the silence. It was rare for someone to show up unannounced. Marcos went out to see, and when the tires stopped in front of the main house, he froze. It was his brother, Henry, a face he hadn't seen in over 5 years. And with it came a hard look and an envelope. "We need to talk," said Henry, still with dust on his clothes and hurt in his eyes. Helena appeared on the balcony, felt the tense mood, and quietly retreated. She knew there was a story there that Mark had never fully told. And maybe it was time. They sat on the old wooden bench, and for a few seconds, the sound of the wind among the trees was the only conversation. Henry took the envelope from his coat and handed it to Mark. "This is the paperwork from the sale of our mother's house. You dropped everything and disappeared. Do you think it's fair to leave everything behind me?" Mark lowered his head. The memory of the sick mother, her last months, of the bitter silences between the brothers, and then the escape. "I did not run away from you, Henry. I ran away from myself. Well, now you have to face it." The conversation was tough, painful, full of old knots that needed to be carefully untied. Helena, from the inside of the house, watched through the window with a heavy heart. She knew the new Mark, but there was the Mark of the past, the one that carried guilt, open wounds, pain that still echoed. But then something unexpected happened. After hours of silence, of accusations and truths, Henry rose. He looked around. He watched the garden, the flowers, people passing by smiling, the dogs sleeping in the sun. "You built all this here?" "With her." Marcos pointed to Helena, who nodded timidly from the door. Henry took a deep breath. For the first time, without anger. "So maybe you did the right thing, even if it hurt." He didn't stay. He left the same day. "But before you go, you left something at the gate. A vase with basil and a ticket. To start over, sometimes you have to lose yourself first." Helena hugged Marcos that night as if for the first time. "Love, the mountain did not hide you. It healed you." He cried. So is she. But they were good tears, those that wash the soul. And that night, a gentle rain fell on the refuge. Not like a storm that sweeps, but as a blessing that waters what has been planted with love. The dawn after the storm seemed different, not only for the clear sky or the scent of wet earth, but because within Mark and Helen something had changed. It was as if every word said the day before, every memory brought back by Henry, had dug even deeper into the roots of what they were building there. And for the first time, Marcos felt his chest light, without the weight of guilt, without the shackles of the past. Only he, the present, and that place where love now blossomed even more strongly. "You know what I got?" he said while preparing breakfast, still in his apron dirty with flour. "That you love bread more than me?" joked Helena, laughing. "Also, but I realized that we created something bigger than I imagined here." Helena smiled, curious. "What do you mean?" "That place, the refuge, the mountain, all that, it's touched more people than we thought. Just yesterday, when Enrique left, he said to me, 'Marcos, you didn't run away. You turned pain into welcome.'" She shut up, because he was right. In recent months, people came from all corners. Some to rest, others to meet again. Many simply remember that it is possible to live slowly and well, There was the couple in crisis who spent a weekend there and left holding hands. The young woman who had lost her father and found meaning in the swing of the net. The retired gentleman who found pleasure in tending the community garden. And in that instant, something inside them both cleared. They hadn't just found a home. They had created a lighthouse. A point of light for those who needed to stop, breathe, and start over. In the same week, they decided to open the doors of the refuge in a different way. It would not be a hotel, not a conventional business. It would be a space of healing, of exchange, of simplicity. A place where stories met, where people left a little different from when they arrived. They called it Project Reunion. They created small huts with symbolic names. Hope, renovation, quiet, courage. In each one, a proposal for reflection, connection, and rest. And the most beautiful? The stories that were born there were many. Of love, of reconciliation, of discovery. What about Mark and Helena? They were at the center of everything, not as owners, but as guardians of something sacred, time and shared love. On the balcony at sunset, between a chamomile tea and the sound of birds, Helena looked at Marcos and said, "Who knew that dropping everything would bring us so much? Peace, purpose, and you." He answered, resting his forehead on hers. The mountain was the setting, but the story was about courage, about the love that, instead of running away, decided to flourish away from the noise. The sun was already setting behind the mountains, tinting the sky with golden and pink hues, when a different car drove up the dirt road leading to the refuge. It was rare for someone to arrive unannounced. Most visitors booked weeks in advance, especially since the reunion project had gone viral on some social media. Marcos, curious, went out to the balcony. Helena came right behind, wiping her hands on her apron. From the car descended a middle-aged, elegant woman with a firm smile and a watchful eye. She wore boots, but she was clearly not used to clay. And yet he carried something in his gaze, a mixture of respect and enthusiasm. "Good afternoon," she said, already walking up to them with her hand outstretched. "My name is Adriana. I am a producer of humanized content and documentaries. I needed to come here in person." Helen and Mark looked at each other, surprised. "Documentaries?" he asked, trying to disguise nervousness. "Yes," Adriana replied, excited. "Your work here came to me through a friend who spent a weekend at the Courage Hut. And I was completely touched. I searched, I saw reports, I read messages, and I thought, this story needs to be told." Helena frowned, wary. "Counted? What do you mean?" "Like a documentary. But not just anyone," Adriana explained, her eyes shining. "A special on the power of simplicity. About how one couple left town, old plans, and turned mutual care and love into something that impacts the lives of so many people." Mark was silent for a while. Helena too. They had never thought of exposing their lives like that. All the change, the pain of milestones, the ups and downs. It was an intimate thing. But at the same time, they knew that many people carried the same desire for change. Many couples were tired of the rush, the charges, the lack of time to simply live together for real. Maybe telling that story could be more than exposure. It could be inspiration. Adriana seemed to understand their hesitation. "I don't want to turn you into celebrities. I want to turn this mountain into a mirror, where those who watch can see themselves, recognize themselves, and maybe create the courage to do differently." Helena then held Mark's hand, and with a quiet smile he said, "Let's think carefully, because if this project was born out of love, it's only fair that it inspires more love out there." That night, they talked like they hadn't in a while. They talked about the fears, the limits, but also about the possibility of touching even more hearts. To show that happiness can, yes, be far from the big city, and that true peace is born when two hearts walk together, even in the midst of stones. At the end of the conversation, Marcos smiled. "I think the world needs to hear a story like ours." Helena nodded, her eyes waterlogged. "Then let it be true, and with the same love with which it all began." But what they didn't know yet, it was that this documentary would change much more than the lives of those who would watch. I'd change theirs too. A deciso foi tomata como coração. Como quais tudo que Helena e Marcos fizeram desde que pisaram naquela montanha. E poucas semanas depois da visita de Adriana, a equipe de filmagem chegou com equipamentos, drones, luzes e uma curiosidade que parecia não caber na trilha estreita que levava ao refúgio. Parece que estamos sendo abduzidos por uma nave moderna. Brinca Marcos, vendo o drone sobrevor a horda. Helena riu, mas por dentro sentia aquele frio na barriga. Era diferente de receber hóspedes querendo esse desconector, agora, o mundo queria esse conector como historia deles. Os projetores neo so gravaram entrevistas, mas acompanharam o dia a dia. Mostram Helena correndo levandas pela manhã. Marcos ensinando hóspede a fazer pau de fermentação natural. Mostram as pequenas cabanas e seus nomes. Esperança, liberdade, coragem cada uma com uma mensagem, simbolismo. Mas o que mais emociona a equipe foi algo que ninguém esperava. O casal, durante uma das entrevistas, Lu juntos uma carta que escreveram ao outro, no dia que decidiram deixar a cidade. A carta falava de medo, de sonhos, de tudo o que eles acabavam que perderiam. Mas no falava do que realmente importava. Se tivermos ao outro, mesmo que tudo fall, ainda teremos tudo. As câmeras neo capturam apenas palavras. Capturam verdade. Quando o documentário foi lançado, neo demora para que explodisse. Reencontro na montanha. Esse foi o nome escolhido. Comentários conqueram a pipocar de todos os lados do mundo. Chorei do comico ao El sao exemplo de que amor e simplicidade podem andar juntos. Essa história salva meu casamento. Me fez lembrar do que eu realmente queria quando disse simdat. Largamos tudo. Compramos uma combi. Obrigado por mostrar-me que é possível. E AI cómico avalanche. Convites para entrevistas, palestras sobre propósito. 8 propostas de reality show. Que eles recusaram como sorriso educado. Mas foi justamente esse sucesso que os coloca diante de novo dilema. Como manter a essência, quando o mundo quer pedaço dela? A montanha, antes silenciosa, cómico a atrair mais do que carecos feridos em busca de paz. Viram curiosos influenciadores, Marcos correndo colabora. Marcos cómico a esse irritar como movimento. Helena tentava manter o equilibrio. E esse estivermos perdendo o que construmos? E ele diz uma noite enquanto olhava o seu estrelado. A gente veio para esse encontrar. E agora parece que estamos sendo engolidos pela expectativa dos outros. Helena ficou em silêncio por instante. Depois seguiu a mão dele e disse: Então vamos lembrar de uma coisa. Nós não somos o refúgio. Nós somos o motivo dele existir. Se precisar, a gente recomica. Sempre juntos. Naquela noite, tomamos uma nova decisão. Reduziriam o número de visitantes. So viriam aqueles que realmente entendessem o propósito. E mais importante, usariam o alcance para criar algo maior. Nasceria alium novo projeto. Refugios urbanos. Pequenas acos e oficinas nas cidades, ensinando casas e famílias a criar espaços de reconexão onde quer que estejam. Na montanha, no barro, no próprio lar. O amor deles não precisava de fama. Precisava de verdade. E eles sabiam. Ser feliz juntos ainda era o projeto mais importante de todos. With the decision made, Helena and Marcos spent weeks adjusting what they called the second phase of the refuge. It was no longer just a physical place among the mountains. Now, it was a living idea, a concept that could flourish in any corner of the world, as long as there was a spark of love willing to be rekindled. We don't want to be just a destination, Helena said in one of her first workshops in the city. We want to be a seed. And that's exactly what they planted. Couples began to participate in meetings in cultural centers, public squares, even in community halls. They taught what they had learned at Mara: how to simplify routine, how to listen with your heart, how to turn small actions into big acts of care. And it was not at all mirabolant. Turn off the phone an hour before bedtime and talk looking into the eyes. Make the other's coffee the way he likes it, without him asking. Rediscover silence together. These were the classes. Simple, real, powerful. The repercussions were as human as the proposal. In a country town, an elderly couple who had barely spoken to each other for years relearned to walk hand in hand. In a bustling metropolis, 2 young parents decided to create a mini refuge on the balcony of their apartment. In another corner of the country, a teacher used the teachings to apply in the classroom the importance of listening. Meanwhile, high on the mountain, the refuge remained serene. Quieter, truer. The Courage Hut became a planning room. Hope now welcomed volunteers who wanted to learn the simple lifestyle. And there, between one campfire and another, Helena and Marcos realized what they had created. A reconnection current. All because one day they decided to listen to the call of the heart. All because they chose simplicity over haste, love over automatic routine. Marcos, looking at an orange sunset, said in an embarrassed voice, "Who knew that running away from the city was actually the way to get back inside us?" Helena smiled, sat down beside him, and with her head resting on his shoulder, whispered, "And who knew that living with less would bring more than we dreamed of?" And so they followed, not as gurus, not as celebrities, but as living witnesses that love, when showered with patience, silence, and intention, is capable of changing the world, starting from the inside. Time passed. The seasons changed as they always do, but in the heart of that mountain, something remained constant. The certainty that love, when cared for with kindness, patience, and truth, flourishes even in the most difficult soil. Helena and Marcos, now with slightly grayer hair, walked through the trees of the refuge as one walks through a living story. The hut that was once a shelter from fatigue was now a nest of new dreams. The silence, which used to frighten, today welcomed. They no longer had to prove anything to the world. The life they chose was already proof enough that when two people decide to walk side by side, even with fear, even with doubts, something extraordinary happens. Not something great in the eyes of fame, but something great in the eyes of the soul. "What we built here," Marcos said, his eyes waterlogged, "is not only ours. It is from those who believe that it is still worth loving calmly. It is from those who understand that sometimes to move forward, we need to go back to the essence," completed Helena, with that smile that said everything without saying anything. In the city, stories continued to spread. Couples inspired by their journey have started their own refuges. Some in simple villages, others in small apartments. Still others, in the bustling heart of metropolises. Each with a unique purpose. Rescue the love that the world insists on pushing into the corner. And the most beautiful? No one wanted to copy Helena and Mark. They wanted to live their own version of that choice. The last scene of the video shows the couple observing the starry sky, sitting on the porch of the hut they called Gratitude. Holding hands, silent, just feeling. The sound of the wind, the smell of wood, the warmth of the other. And at the bottom of the screen, a phrase appears as if whispered. Not all love needs words. Sometimes it's enough just to stay and take care. What's up? Did you feel this story in your heart? If you believe in the power of a simple life, in a love with presence, and in decisions that change everything, subscribe to the channel and activate Tinkerbell, because here, we not only tell stories, we live with them. Leave your like, share with whom you love, and comment there. What would be your refuge for two? Until the next story. And remember, living together is the greatest adventure of all.